Today, many see Russia's military as the second strongest in Ukraine. Its equipment, technology, leadership, troops, strategy, tactics, and morale, a case study in failure, even as Moscow inflicts devastating, indiscriminate, and gratuitous damage on Ukraine and Ukrainians. Russia is estimated to have suffered more than 100,000 casualties in the last 6 months alone, as Putin sends wave after wave of Russians into a meat grinder of his own making.
The Ukrainian military capabilities are still limited at several levels, and for sure, Russia has all the military cards to win against the Ukrainian armed forces. Even though Ukrainian forces have been trained to wage modern warfare, modern operations, and they actually took part in modern operations together with NATO, still the equipment they have is still relatively outdated. There have been some improvements in the command and control equipment of Ukraine, which allows for more secure communications, which is quite essential. However, even there, if faced with the power of Russia's electronic warfare capabilities, most probably that will not be enough. Also, Ukraine has limited air defense capabilities and anti-missile capabilities, and which is a big problem vis-a-vis Russia, whose military operations are actually focused on rapidly seizing air control, air superiority. Also, they're focused on heavy use of artillery, and they're focused by using these two different techniques on shelling heavily infrastructures. And then, of course, there's the problem of sheer numbers. Ukraine has a relatively high number of troops, in between 150,000 and 200,000 troops. However, basically those are the numbers of just Russian ground forces. Ukraine can for sure call up reservists, and there are, as I mentioned before, volunteer territorial defense units, but still those are not highly professional soldiers.
Yevgeny Prigozhin claims in this video that his forces have fully captured the eastern city of Bakhmut.
These streets where the Ukrainian military says that fights are still going on, that they would put up resistance, but that the situation was critical. So it's very hard to say what's the exact situation on the ground, but it's not unlikely that by the end of the day or this weekend, Wagner will have full control over the city.
Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people. He'll never extinguish their love of freedom, and he will never weaken resolve.
А дальше по-русски. Сегодня я инициировал телефонный разговор с президентом Российской Федерации. Результат – тишина. Хотя тишина должна быть на Донбассе.
Putin has unleashed violence and chaos. But while he may make gains on the battlefield, he'll pay a continuing high price over the long run.
Finns understood that if Russia violated the core principles of the UN Charter, sovereignty, territorial integrity, independence, if they did that in Ukraine, it will imperil their own peace and security as well. We understood that too. That's why, over the course of 2021, as Russia ratcheted up its threats against Kyiv and amassed more and more troops tanks and planes on Ukraine's borders, we made every effort to get Moscow to de-escalate its manufactured crisis and resolve its issues through diplomacy.
А дальше по-русски. Сегодня я инициировал телефонный разговор с президентом Российской Федерации. Результат – тишина. Хотя тишина должна быть на Донбассе.
Putin has unleashed violence and chaos. But while he may make gains on the battlefield, he'll pay a continuing high price over the long run.
О том, что может произойти со дня на день, сегодня говорит весь мир. Причина может возникнуть в любой момент. Любая провокация, любая вспышка. Вспышка, которая может сжечь все. Вам говорят, что это пламя принесет освобождение народу Украины. Но украинский народ свободен. Он помнит о своем прошлом и сам строит свое будущее.
When the history of this era is written, Putin's war in Ukraine will have left Russia weaker and the rest of the world stronger.
Журналисты, музыканты, актеры, спортсмены, ученые, доктора, блогеры, стендап, тиктокеры и многие другие. Обычные, простые люди. Мужчины, женщины, старики, дети, отцы и, главное, матери. Ровно так же, как и люди в Украине. Так же, как власть в Украине. Как бы вас ни пытались убить.
We spent a lot of time talking about NATO. First, I do want to remind people that Ukraine and the NATO alliance have built a strong partnership. Ukraine is the only non-NATO nation supporting every NATO mission. In Afghanistan and Iraq, Ukrainian troops are helping to support young democracies. In Kosovo, Ukrainians are helping keep the peace. Ukraine now seeks to deepen its cooperation with the NATO alliance through a membership action plan. Your nation has made a bold decision, and the United States strongly supports your request. In Bucharest this week, I will continue to make America's position clear. We support MAP for Ukraine and Georgia. Helping Ukraine move toward NATO membership is in the interest of every member in the alliance and will help advance security and freedom in this region and around the world.
Забыли. Напрочь. Западные идеологи и политики много лет говорили.
After marathon talks with Vladimir Putin, round 2 of Emmanuel Macron's shuttle diplomacy is continuing in Kiev, where Volodymyr Zelensky will be seeking reassurances from his French counterparts. Macron's bringing the message that addressing Putin's security concerns can go hand in hand with defending Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Ukrainians' biggest fear is that Paris might cut a deal with Putin at Kiev's expense. Key to Tuesday's talks will be efforts to revive the so-called Normandy format, a grouping of France, Germany, Ukraine and Russia, which would finally put into force a shaky ceasefire agreed back in 2015. The Minsk agreement also called for the withdrawal of soldiers and heavy arms from eastern Ukraine, neither of which has happened. In recent months, more than 140,000 troops have amassed at Russia's border with Ukraine.
When the Minsk Accords were signed, there wasn't anything like today's intense Russian military presence at the border. That is why this represents for us a substantial shift, and it mustn't distort or scramble our discussions. And that's something we discussed with President Putin, and when I talk about stability and de-escalation, that's what it's about.
But Putin blames Kiev for the ongoing conflict.
It's obvious the current authorities have set a course for the dismantling of the Minsk agreement.
Kiev and Moscow have clashed over how to implement the deal, which requires Kiev to provide autonomy to the rebel-held east and an amnesty to separatists. Ukraine's president wants to ensure that any peace deal doesn't give the separatists, and effectively the Kremlin, a veto over Kiev's foreign policy. Macron is to brief Putin by phone on the results of his talks with Zelensky. All sides have so far left the door open to further diplomacy.